We are going to start. Hello? So we shall begin now a special presentation by Professor Sreenivasan, the new director of ICTP. ICTP means International Center for Theoretical Physics and Mathematics. That's and mathematics is on my account, if you allow me to say so. It's a very important international center. Has been promoting mathematics and physics for 40 years now, or 39. Professor Sreenivasan is most qualified for keeping and upgrading this great work of the great work of Abdul Salam in creating this center, with the same the very purpose I just mentioned, that is development of mathematics and physics in the developing country. I must say he is also an outstanding scientist. Hard to define if he is a mathematician, a physicist, or engineer. More properly, I think he blends all together. And we will hear about the scientific part of his work tomorrow on turbulence. But today, he'll talk about the activities at ICTP to give you a broad view of such an important center, and he wants to draw you to join this effort for the development of good science all over the world. Please.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jacob. As you mentioned, I will give an overview of this International Center for Theoretical Physics. You should interpret theoretical physics to include mathematics, of course. Is there a pointer that I can use somewhere? You have a pointer? No? Maybe? Okay. So, as this says here, physics and mathematics in the developing world, what ICTP does to promote and strengthen it. That would be what I would like to say. Now, this is where this center is, this building, and it's not very clear, but the Adriatic Sea is very close to it. Since many of you may not have heard about ICTP and where it is, so I have a transparency that tells you where it is. So on the right there is Europe, of course, and then Italy at the bottom. And then I have expanded it, the corner of Italy there, and that's where Trieste is. And I've also expanded this little map in here. So there is the town of Trieste, and next to it, up there, a few kilometers from the town, is where ICTP is located. And ICTP also houses some of the other organizations that are mentioned below. The most important one of them is TWAS. This is the Third World Academy of Sciences, for which Jacob is the General Secretary for some time. So, as he mentioned, there are a number of purposes for this center, and one of them is to foster science and mathematics in the developing world. And we have support for doing this from three basic ingredients that seem to come together here. One of them, of course, is the Italian government pays a fair bit of the fraction of the budget 85% of the budget, and that makes many things possible. And of course, what really makes it possible for people from the developing world to come year after year to ICTP is that it is not an Italian organization. It is an organization that is under the umbrella of UNESCO and IAEA, which is International Atomic Energy Agency. And they also provide some funding for the center, but that's not the most important part of it. It is the umbrella that makes it possible for this center to be treated as a part of the whole world. And that's really what makes it possible for people to come year after year. And well, of course, there is the vision of the person who created this and a number of people who are involved in this, including, of course, people from Brazil, and the goodwill of the scientists and large part of the developing world makes it really possible for it to function. What's the mandate of ICTP? The mandate is derived from a tripartite agreement between the three organizations that support us: Italian government, then UNESCO and IAEA. And the principal purpose of the center is to foster, through training and research, the advancement of theoretical physics, as I said, interpreted broadly, with special regard to the needs of the developing countries, but not necessarily restricted to them, so as to help and encourage physicists from those countries to continue and expand their scientific work in their own countries. That is one of the primary things about ICTP. It does not try to pull people out of the countries in which they reside, but then help them somehow, if help is the word to use, to foster their own activities in their own countries. Now, a little bit about the history of, a little bit about the history of the center. It was started, as Jacob mentioned, in 1964. We have the 40th anniversary coming up pretty soon. And it was started in this building in downtown Trieste. But over time, we moved to this new building, or relatively new building, just across the Adriatic Sea. And in 1970, until which time IAEA was the only organization that was managing or involved in the management of ICTP, UNESCO joined the management team, although this is essentially an autonomous institution. And Salam, who started this institution, got the Nobel Prize in 1979 for weak interactions. And then primarily now UNESCO is the administrative agency. Now, what are our goals for the center? Our goals primary goals are that we wish to support and encourage higher education and research in developing countries. But we realize that we cannot do this until we do good research ourselves. So in fact, the first order of business would be to maintain high level of science locally, both in quality and quantity, for it to matter somewhere else. And then foster advanced scientific research in developing countries, especially in physics and mathematics, and support personal excellence everywhere. Now, this is the phrase which I emphasize very much, very often. And this is independent of the kind of economic background one comes from or the cultural background one inherits. But there is no excuse for not being able to give one's best to the science that one does. And this is a concept that we promote a lot. And we create and maintain international forum for exchange of scientific information through courses, workshops, and seminars. These might be at introductory levels and advanced levels, all of them at different times of the year. So there are many conferences that this center supports. And of course, we have a variety of visitors for whom we provide a number of facilities, which I will discuss a little bit. And we continually give some thought to how to increase our impact on the developing world by involving the developing world in great detail. We just don't sit around and think about what developing world needs and then provide recipes. And of course, readjust our priorities. Now, let me say a bit about what we do at the center itself, and there are a number of activities that this center does outside of the physical confines of the center, and I will talk about that as well. Now, very briefly said, we cover this many areas in physics and mathematics. There is traditionally a strong in high energy physics, that was the area in which Salam excelled. And then condensed matter physics. There is a significant activity in condensed matter, probably the best group in all of Italy for sure. And then there is a small group that works on weather and climate. And then there is a group that works on pure and applied mathematics. And there are a number of other little programs on microprocessors, ecological and environmental economics, in the interior of the earth, radio propagation, telecommunication, etc. Now, we have a very good staff, and there are 28 permanent scientific members, essentially covering these first 3 or 4 areas, and the rest of them we cover through a number of consultants and other people who are associated with the center, and these may be about 20 in number, and they are coming from local institutions quite often. And then there are 20 staff associates. These are relatively senior people from various parts of the world who not only spend some time at ICTP, but also act on behalf of ICTP as their ambassadors in the rest of the world. And then there are many postdocs, about 45 of them, from all parts of the world. And of course, there is a significant general staff, 100 or so in number. And what do these 100 or so general staff do, in addition to supporting the permanent people and all this? They take care of many issues related to the visitors that come to the center. I'll say a little bit about how many and from where and so on. These numbers, these visitors are both short-term visitors who may come for a few days, and long-term visitors who may come for some months. And then there are these so-called associates who have long-term association with the center, and then students and collaborators from other institutions nearby. Now, let me say a little bit about the type of visitors. Over time, since the inception of the center in 1964, there has been, according to an estimate made by the center itself, I'm not quite sure how precise that is, it's about 80,000 visitors or so. That's a relatively large number. And the idea of the visitors is to draw them from developing world and developed countries with different experiences and different types of backgrounds and so on, and mix them together so each enriches from the other. And these are from 170 nations, all of them in the UNESCO list, for instance, more or less. And if you can read this small print, it will tell you where, which countries or which continents they are from. And you have Africa, Asia, etc., etc. But I will not dwell too much on that. For 2002, for instance, we have had about 4,000 scientists or so who came there, and they are generally connected with some of the activities or the other. There are some dozen groups as well, research groups, and they are either connected to some activity like a conference or a workshop or a school, or they might be connected to a research group that works in the center or is associated with the center. So here is where they come from. I'm sorry, these numbers are not very visible, and the one that may be of interest to you is from South America in particular. So we draw people from all parts of the world, including a large number from Western Europe and some as far away as Australia. And a little bit more about these visitors. A significant part of these visitors is the so-called associates. These are people who are working and have their own careers in their own countries, and they come to the center for a fixed period of time each year. For instance, it may be 6 months stretched over 3 years or 6 years or something like that. They come and spend some time there and do their work and go back to their countries. And many of these associates have achieved distinguished careers in their own countries, including members of parliament, ministers, and so on and so forth. And in 2002, we had 800 associates, but not all of them actually show up in a given year. Maybe about a third of them is a more realistic number. And when they come, they we provide them the facilities to do the work. And here are where these 2002 visitors, 2046 come from. South America here, and Africa, then Europe, then Asia, and lastly a little bit from Australia. And we also have the so-called, these are all individuals. These are individuals who are, and we have no particular association with the institutions to which they belong there. But we also have arrangements with various institutions, some 130 of them or so. And these arrangements vary in content from one institution to the other. They basically allow people from these institutions to come and spend some time either as a part of a conference or in fact just a scientific collaboration. And then another activity we have is a diploma program into which we admit about 40 students every year in 3 areas of physics and mathematics, which is condensed matter physics, high energy physics, and then just mathematics. And these students are generally drawn not from countries like Brazil and India and China and so on, but from really lower in the kind of economic development. Mostly because we think that if we allow people from countries like the ones I mentioned earlier, they would overwhelm the number of students that we get in these diploma programs. And what we do with these diploma students is basically cover a number of areas that they have been a little short on, and many of them are sought after as graduate students in many parts of the world. So a little bit about the facilities for the visitors. We of course have guest houses in which we put them up, and then we have a first-class library which is reputed to be one of the very best parts of ICTP. And then of course computing facilities, just as you do here in this institute. There are many conferences and workshops and so on, and of course makes it easy if you also provide them with a bit of money and food and everything else. Basically the idea is to provide them all the facilities that will make it possible for them to do their work without worrying about little things. So here is a little bit about educational program. We have this diploma program I mentioned. We also started a new master's program on complexity and things of that sort, which includes economics. And then an important ingredient of this is the so-called sandwich programs, where we house for a part of the year at ICTP students who are doing PhD in their own countries. So they spend maybe half the time in their countries and half the time in ICTP, with a co-advisor in ICTP and a co-advisor in their part of the world. And they get their degree in their own institutions. But when they spend their time in ICTP, we provide them the support, including for travel, for instance. So this is a very important part of what we do. And then we also provide them experimental facilities in the nearby synchrotron lab, Electra, where a number of people actually end up using their facilities. And the work I have described so far, it is what is done within the confines of the center. But outside the center, in fact, the center is involved in a number of things. And we have a little division called External Activities Division, Office of External Activities. And it connects up with several affiliated centers in many parts of the world. And these centers and ICTP have some common agenda which we pursue together. That is to say, a faster science in developing part of the world. And ICTP is a part of 15 networks which is set up among, let's say, countries in nearby regions, geographically nearby. And it provides many visiting scholarships and supports many scientific meetings and then training schools as well. So this, for instance, tells you where it has supported over time. This number of dots is just a reflection of the number of activities. And we also try to match the interests of scientists from various countries with the interests of laboratories in not only Italy now, but also in the rest of Europe. So they come spend their time there for of the art of a year or two. In the end, it is proved to be beneficial for both of them. Now, we also have what is known as the donations program, by which we support a number of universities elsewhere. And of course, it doesn't apply to a place like this one, but there are a number of other countries where, for instance, libraries have been burned down because of the political struggles, and they have hardly anything in them, and we try to provide books and journals and so on. And this is the electronic journal delivery service, so-called, where if somebody tells us about a paper that they would like to have, which they cannot find somehow, we try to provide them electronically. And we also support a number of publications from people in the developing world. Now, I think this center over its time has had a lot of impact on science elsewhere. I just thought I would show you 3 quotes, and I will say a little bit about Brazil in a bit. This is a quote from the Deputy Minister of Research, who happens to be a professor in physics, and it says ICTP has had a long-standing impact on science in Iran, and the most important aspect of it is the concept of excellence, and I dare say that ICTP has been the most influential thing in this institution in this part of the world to bring about this concept of excellence. And as I say, excellence does not necessarily mean we support, let us say, the same type of activities everywhere. For instance, it would be very hard to do, let's say, cold atoms in Rwanda, for instance, at the moment. But that's not the same thing as saying that you cannot support personal excellence in every part of the world, and that's what we very much hope we do. And then this is a statement from, let's say, head of particle physics in Vietnam. And ICTP was very useful to me personally, and it opened up a new world for students and so on and so forth. So here is one from Turkey, essentially reflecting the same sort of sentiment from different corners of the world. And in fact, ICTP does play a role that is beyond science itself. Although ICTP is a scientific institution, its interest is science, it does science, by which I include mathematics as well. And it has no political role to play whatever, but it has had historically a very important role, especially when the world was divided as East and West, as you know very well. And at that time, ICTP provided a platform for which people from different parts of the world could come and meet. And today, too, it serves an important purpose. I want to say that I want to put it in perspective by being realistically modest, because the problems facing the developing world are really immense. It's just huge, and they're very diverse. And by claiming that ICTP plays any role at all, I only want to be sure that you understand it is said in a modest tone. Besides assisting the building of scientific infrastructure, as some of which I have already described, ICTP plays an important role in a broader sense, and that is, it brings people from, we first of all value that science, besides being a tool for prosperity, which is of course how it started off in many parts of the world, is a positive factor in creating a better world. In fact, I don't know any other thing that might unify us as a species better. And we think that shared experiences of scientists from developing and developed countries contribute to a better international understanding, and presumably will lead to a less divisive world. Now, what more is possible? We have, of course, done only a little bit. ICTP is a small institution, and while it has done, I think, a great deal for science in large parts of the world, it still should be remembered that the problems are huge, and many things are possible, many more things are possible. But I am trying to emphasize a better quality of services to students, postdocs, and associates and visitors, and revamp our associates program, which I just described a little bit. It's working very well, but I think it has to work better. And there is a thought that there might be a PhD program, but I've been saying that anything that we do, we should do well, and until we know we can do it well, we are not sure we will engage in anything new. And constantly we have to worry about what research areas we should cover, and what research areas are relevant to the rest of the world. And we are also trying to encourage more responsibility on the part of the scientifically developed states, like Brazil, for instance, which could take greater responsibility for, as in fact it already does, for the neighboring part of the world. And for instance, India could take greater responsibility for areas nearby, and so could China, and some other countries like that. We would like to see the world as a whole come together, somehow realize that you cannot leave anybody behind in scientific learning and development. And I am also working with UNESCO in the following sense. We have traditionally provided books and journal subscriptions to various countries, but now, of course, the world is connected electronically. At least some part of the world is connected electronically. And now, today, it's no longer the best way to support science by just providing one book or one journal at a time, but in fact making it possible to have access to internet to all parts of the world. And this, of course, is a difficult thing to do. It needs money and infrastructure and so on. We have just started to work on 2 countries as an example, to provide an example for UNESCO to move forward. And they all think it's a great idea, but they don't have any money, they say. So we are just showing how it can be done for at least 2 cases. And ICTP is well known in the developing world, but not so well known in Italy, where it is housed. And of course, since Italians provide the money, it's important for us to be known better there, and I'm working a little bit on that. And of course, there is in Trieste, there are many other international institutions in which we are, of which we are a part, and we are working to enhance the whole system. And I think you will have heard, perhaps from Jacob Palestra already, that a big part of the problem science and mathematics faces in the world is that the pipeline is clogged in some sense. Clogged, well, it's poor, let's say. Clogged is not the word. And part of it is that we do not have exciting teachers in science and mathematics as many as we would like to have. So eventually, we would like to have a program where we put some emphasis on teaching, not as a methodology, which is, of course, not, in my view, the best way to do it. Now, let me say a few words about connection with Brazil. And I think traditionally the scientific establishment here and ICTP has been tied very well. Okay, I put in a part of the world where Brazil is. So just numbers, to reel off a few numbers. Since 1970, there has been about that many visits from Brazil. Now, it's not that 2,000 visitors, because some visitors may come more than once, but it's of that order. It's that order of numbers. And in the last 5 years, about 430 visitors or so. And we have on our scientific council, which is one of the bodies that help us decide what is scientifically relevant and important and so on. We have representation, you know this person, of course, and he still serves on our scientific council. And we are very thankful to him, and of course to the others here, the other 2 who served on the scientific council in the past, who have given a lot of advice and give a perspective. It's easy to sit somewhere and then think we know all the answers, but the scientific council provides a good check on reality check, so to speak, on these things. They meet once a year, and they're independent body that gives advice on the scientific aspects of the center. Now let me say a little bit more. In the past, ICTP has a thing called the ICTP Prize. It also has a Dirac Medal, which is given to established scientists in many parts of the world. And by the way, so far, not one person from the developing world has received the Dirac Medal. But the ICTP Prize is special. It is given to people from the developing world and who are young, so to speak, below 40 years of age, and who have made significant contributions to science and mathematics. And here is one picture taken of a Brazilian young scientist receiving the prize. And these are in fact the people from Brazil who have received this prize over time. And we have close ties, of course, with this institution, partly because of the personal ties with Jacob, but also institutionally we have relations. And then we support a number of activities in CLAF, Centro Latino Americano de Física, mostly to support graduate students and others who come from other parts of Latin America to Brazil and connections of that sort. And here is the connection. This is the council for the development of science and technology for the nation as a whole. But out of this, this is an umbrella organization, as you understand, and there are a number of institutions which are tied to this, which are supported by ICTP, mostly to run conferences and to invite visitors and support students and so on and so forth. And we have also have connections with University Campinas and also the Federal University in Rio. So these are the connections we have had with Brazil. But as I said before, we would like to see stronger connections, and I would like the responsibility, ICTP's responsibilities, some of them to be taken over time by countries like your own. So let me just close with this is the ICTP building. This is the main building where most of the activities occur. There is another building somewhere there which houses administration, and there are two guest houses a little bit further away and a little bit further away in this direction. This is the statement that is attributed to the founding director, Abdus Salam. Scientific thought is the common heritage of mankind, and this is the spirit with which ICTP works. And it believes that, well, I personally, and of course the institution as a whole, believes that this is one of the important uniting features of the world, and if you leave some part of the world behind, it's bound to bite you back sometime or the other, and therefore even as a matter of self-interest, it is important to involve the whole world, and this is one of the missions of the center. Thank you very much.